Alrighty guys, welcome to Voicey here. This is your host, Captain Zach, and today's subreddit is r/StoriesAboutKevin.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.
This story's called Covina Costs Me a Week of My Classes and Makes Me Look Like a Criminal. Here's a Covina I unfortunately had to interact with for my visa application. Now, this might seem alien to a lot of you, but with an Indian passport, you need a visa to visit most countries. Minor context. I was moving from Mumbai to Milan in 2009 for a few fashion courses for about a year. This would be my first time across the ocean, since I've already been to the Asian countries as well as a few Middle Eastern ones. My family didn't want me to be alone in my first stint with Europe, so we planned a family vacation about a month prior to my classes, where we would visit a few friends and family in Brussels, Stockholm, and then finally go to Milan, visit my school, and even find a place to study at. For the vacation, I had to have a tourist visa, obviously, and my travel agent advised me that we should return a week before my departure to apply for my student visa, which would take 3 to 4 working days to process. Easy, right? As luck would have it, while I was on my vacation, the Italian rules changed and now it would take 7 working days to process a visa. Enter Covina. She was working at the Italian desk at the visa office in Mumbai when I had to apply for my student visa. I go to Covina, and I already know I'm missing the first couple of days of my class and will have to rebook my flight because while I had 8 days in hand, 2 of them were holidays. So I go to Covina with a hopeful smile. My mom always told me to be extra nice to government workers no matter how shrewd they can be, since they have the power to decline whatever you want. So I thought if I was very nice, she could perhaps help. I was wrong. She took a look at my passport and said I can't get a new visa because I already had an existing Schengen visa from the Belgian consulate. She was half right. She was talking about my holiday tourist visa that was a single entry visa, and by default had a validity of 45 days. She said I would have to apply after about 2 weeks once the validity expired. I almost cried. My single entry tourist visa was already stamped, which renders it invalid for further use. She simply refused to listen. She said it was still valid, so I asked her, "So I'll be able to travel again using this visa?" And she stared at me and said, "Yes." At this point, I was amused at her stupidity. I was also very close to being rude. I realized she was just another government worker who was going by the book with no actual knowledge and clearly no experience of international travel. Not that I was an expert on the same, but I still was well read enough to know slightly better and apply logic. So I heaved a sigh of defeat and asked her what I can do, because I have to go to school. She then came up with, "You can cancel the visa and then apply for the new one." She also assured that the cancellation will take 1 full day to process, so I agreed to go for it. I had to write a handwritten formal letter asking for my visa to be cancelled with a few other minor details, and then I submitted it to her. She told me to come back the next day after 2 p.m. The next day, I commute 45 minutes again to get to this office. I see Covina and I go to her. She points to a section that says collection. From there, I get my passport and check to see my canceled visa. The lady at the counter with a confused expression asked why I applied for visa cancellation. I explained briefly and she just shook her head in disbelief as she said it wasn't needed in the first place. I opened my canceled visa and there across the page in bright red with a bold lettered stamp is canceled. Across my face in personal details and in tiny words, without prejudice. My heart sinks because for a minor moment, I felt like some sort of criminal. I made my way back to Covina to submit my passport for my student visa application. She stared at me blankly and said, "Submission is from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and collection is from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. I looked at her in shock. She said, "Come tomorrow to submit." Not her fault, it's the office's policy which she failed to disclose to me. Anyway, I'm back on the 3rd consecutive day to submit my passport. Covina smiled at me. I'm relieved as she fills a form and writes down my details. I don't have to interact with her ever again. A week later, I'm back to collect my passport. I see Covina across the room as I collect my stuff. I checked my visa. I realized that my new student visa expires on the day I finish my classes. So they were expecting me to go to class and then go straight to the airport and fly back home? I went back to the lady at cancellation and pointed that out, and she said they only follow what's written in the forms, which Covina filled. At this point, I'm done with Covina. I don't want to talk to her again. I don't even want to see her again. I already was missing the first week of my class. I had to rebook my air ticket, not entirely her fault, and wasted an additional 3 days thanks to her brilliant idea of canceling my previous visa, which was already an unnecessary step. And now I had to leave on the day my class ends? Not to mention, I would have to make up for this entire week of lost classes. Anyway, I leave. I'm done. Thankfully, when I got to Italy, the officials there were very helpful and much smarter. They couldn't exactly extend my visa, but they gave me a letter that allowed me to stay an additional 2 weeks. And my school supported that by giving me documents that stated since I missed the beginning, I would have to stay back for a bit. God bless and guide anyone who had to go to Italy from Mumbai and had to be assisted by Covina. Till date, I have that cancelled section in my passport since both my new passport and old one are bound together. I always get nervous when I apply for visas because I don't want them to reject me based on that. This story's called The First Kevin I Ever Encountered. So this guy was in my church congregation growing up. The kid was a complete mess. His dad was always on the verge of going broke, except when he was doing so well, he would spend every cent they had. He was the second youngest in a family of like 8 or some crap. Tons of kids. His mom was an anti-vaxxer who refused to treat his ADHD with medicine. She would instead give him a caffeinated Coke every morning. I roll. Like, caffeine can help ADHD. I have ADHD. I use caffeinated drinks to get me through little bursts of stuff like an exam or something. But this kid was a danger to himself with how bad his impulse control and inability to focus were. He'd always been dumb growing up. My dad was a doctor who would help his family out when they were broke with free medical care. They had to call first and it would always be at our house, so broken bones or serious injuries were a no-go. And boy was that kid a frequent visitor. Stitches, splints, the whole 9 yards. You name it, this kid had somehow done it to himself. It was almost inspiring to see how hard he worked at it, but I digress. By the age of 12, we were all in the midst of being hornier and stupider than we'd ever been. Because of this, it made perfect sense for our church to enroll us all in the good old Boy Scouts of America. This is the start of my first story with them. We went camping, as Boy Scouts do, and to make it funnier, we did it as a big organized campout. Several nearby church congregations all invited their kids to go, and we had nearly 200 kids on one outing by the time it was all said and done. Kevin, of course, came along with us. He stayed in our tent and ate with all of us at meals. In regular scouting activities, he was an irritating but omnipresent participant. He was so annoying that his infamy began to spread to us. And by the end of our 3-day mountain excursion, we were the most despised of all the Boy Scout troops. The very last day of our troop, we were given free time to play in the woods. Me, my little brother, some friends from my troop, and Kevin decided we would explore the woods nearby. As we're hiking around, this group of kids from the campsite next to ours yell something at us. A second later, a rock whizzes overhead. I turn around, angry, but more rocks were already incoming. Their leader, a little weasel-faced crap lord I can talk about later, comes running after us with a stick. No explanation, nobody knows why. We just thought they were schlongs. Being Boy Scouts, and also healthy, semi-sane 12 to 14-year-old boys, we already had sticks, so it was war. Their leader swung at my brother. I smashed the stick out of his hand in retaliation and then swung at his reinforcements for a few seconds before he shouts, "Oh, step off!" to us, "Let's go back to camp!" to his backup. I angrily asked him what his problem was, and he just shook his head and goes, "You guys are sick. You think you're funny? You're not. We were looking forward to that watermelon all trip, buttholes," and stomps angrily off back to his camp. Watermelon? Sick? What was he talking about? I asked myself, and we continued our walking. When we returned to camp later that day, we would see the remnants of a smashed watermelon on the ground. I would have blamed Kevin, but he'd been with us since dawn. I guessed that some other camp had done it as a prank and we got blamed for it. We were the closest to them, and we were associated with the single most irritating 12-year-old boy on this earth. Their faulty assumption made sense. Just as I'm coming to this conclusion, though, their scout leader sees we've returned and storms angrily up to our leader. A heated conversation ensues, and Kevin is clearly the cause of it. But why, you ask? He hadn't smashed the watermelon, you said yourself. He had an alibi. Well, dear reader, the alibi only extended to that morning. As we were soon to learn, Kevin's deeds took place under the cover of night. During the early morning, Kevin awoke with an erection, common to pubescent boys. But Kevin was in our tent. He couldn't go around jerking the gherkin in the tent. We would surely awaken and chastise him. Gherkin jerkin on a church trip would surely not go over well. Instead of waiting until the next day, when by evening he would be home, or simply going to the forest to spill his seed, he decided it was time for a twofold revenge. The camp next to us had been mean to him, seemingly for no reason. All he had done was irritate, harass, and heckle them for 2 whole days. And in turn, they had the audacity to call him annoying and make jokes about his behavior to others? This was unacceptable! Unbearable! Unbelievable! Kevin could barely stomach the thought of the humiliation he had faced, and knew that the group had been saving a prize watermelon for their last day in the woods, a treat for their efforts at camp. This brings me to the second part of his 2-part revenge. For so long, watermelon seeds had been inside him. Now was his chance to put his seeds inside a watermelon. Thus, in the wee hours of the morn, Kevin snuck into the neighboring camp, carved a hole into their special watermelon, and inseminated it. The deed done, he returned to our tent and slept peacefully. The following afternoon, the camp of kids were getting ready to dig into their watermelon when they discovered what had occurred. They immediately knew who had done it. In anger and to prevent anyone from consuming the melon's tainted flesh, they themselves smashed the watermelon. They then took to the woods as an armed and angry mob out for revenge. We had no idea. Kevin hadn't bragged about it. He thought it would be a secret he took with him to his grave. Instead, he nearly got us all beat up. The conclusion to that story is that he got ripped a new one. The scout leader, the congregation leader, and his parents all chastised him severely. He was allowed on future campouts, but he was always watched closely by us and our leadership. That's just the start of the dumb crap that kid has done since I've met him. Okay, first off, I'm sorry I can't do the lemon grab scream justice, without my microphone peaking extremely. Also, people might be concerned if they hear someone screaming that. Apartments, you know. Anyways, Kevin, you poor misguided boy, what is going on in that weird little head of yours? I've seen some sexy looking fruit, but I've never looked at a watermelon and been like, oh, well, you're looking extra thick there, watermelon. Mind if I, add some seeds to your sweet interior? I mean, papayas, yeah, sure, but watermelon, come on, man. Watermelon's the fruit of the gods. So sweet, so juicy. In fact, so juicy it doesn't need your juices mixed in there, you sick perv! Alright, this story's called The Exciting Popinator in Covina. I have been a long-term voyeur of this thread and often want to share stories of my kindred Covina. I am on mobile, so I apologize for any formatting anomalies. Some background. My Covina is a smart cookie. She is in IT, enjoys working on crazy math and physics problems for fun, loves tutoring people in all things tech, math, physics related. On a lovely summer afternoon, our child decided that we 3 should have popcorn and binge watch some Phineas and Ferb. She was 8 at the time, but Covina and I love the show as well because who wouldn't want a good bingeinator? So those two go into the kitchen to pop the corns, happily, while I set up our camp. As I sit there and wait, and wait, and wait, I wonder what has become of the situation. I should note at this point that Covina purchased an air popper about a year prior in an effort to be a bit healthier. Prior to this, she had only known how to microwave popcorn. and had only seen me use oil in a pot one time because that was the only method available. After roughly 15 minutes, I hear Covina loudly say, "Oh no!" And, "How is the oil getting out?" And, "Oh jeez, how do I do?" All the while, I hear the child in the background mercilessly laughing. The kind of laughing that comes with watching someone screw up so bad and be so confused that you just have no control over yourself. When I walked in, there was the sound of the air popper running, frantic cries from Covina, more child laughter, and so much wonder and amazement filled me. There was smoke and oil all about. A few popcorn kernels here and there. She just left it running, confused about what to do. I ran over and unplugged it so we did not all die from the monstrosity she created and tried to calm her down. Then the tears began. She explained, "I just warmed up the air popper, then added the oil, and then the corn kernels. Then out of nowhere, the oil started coming out of the sides and bottom and splashing out the top, and then the smoke started and burned." I couldn't stop laughing. I asked her to start from the beginning. Did it make a dent? Then I asked what the machine was. She said, "Air popper!" Still no registration. So I finally asked the child why they allowed Covina to put oil in an air popper. The answer? "2 reasons. Figured she knew what she was doing, and if not, I wanted to see what would happen." If there was ever a time for an emoji on Reddit, the huge grin would go here. That's close enough. Covina still did not understand. So I cleaned this spewing mess, then called her back to the kitchen. I took apart the air popper in front of her and explained the mechanism of airflow. She says, "But I thought we always put oil in." I died a little inside. Took her a bit to mull it over and understand, but she finally got it. And that, my friends, is how my Covina made an oil poppinator with the help of an evil sidekick. That's an adorable story. I love it so much. I am in love with the story and the family and their dynamic and the... I just love ditzy smart girls because they're smart, but they're also kind of dumb. So it's charming, but also incredibly annoying at times, but you learn to love it.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.